Hello and welcome back to the Keeping Up with the Clann podcast with the two Ciaráns. This is the fourth in the edition of the fifth in the edition of Keeping Up with the Clann. Thanks everybody for listening to the first one with Mickey McAllister, and hopefully we'll get a few more interviews out of this here now. So our second interviewee is current senior manager Ronan McAlindan with us tonight. So we're just going to go through Ronan's career and then talk a bit about the COVID impacts that it's had on his first year with Clann, and then we might go into his top 15 also as well. So I'll just head over to my co-host first, Ciarán, for the first question.
Cheers, Todd. Well, Ronan, hope you're keeping well. So a bit like myself and the rest of us, we're just sort of looking a bit of general information. So, tell us a bit about yourself, just so for anybody who hasn't been around the club or missed out with the COVID restrictions last year, just give us a bit of general information about yourself.
Okay, Brad, thank you. Well, last year I was appointed senior manager of Clann. Obviously, last year was sort of a very disjointed year with the COVID, and I'm back now this year from a second year with the club. I live in Portadown, County Armagh, so I'm sort of an outsider, but I would have a small connection to the club in the fact that my brother-in-law, Colin Downey, is a solicitor in Banbridge. He's actually married to my eldest sister. I'm a school teacher maths teacher in Dean McGurk College in Carrickmore. I've been teaching there for 13 years now, and I'm 39 years of age, so I'm getting old.
And in terms of the GAA, Ronan, what's your initial memories? Were you, in terms of when you were a young kid, playing career? What way did that go? Just in general, what's your first memories of the GAA?
Well, I'd imagine like everybody, probably your first memories is being dropped up by your mother or your father. It would have been my father in the case, up to the local Gaelic club here in Portadown, Ciarán. At that stage, you wouldn't have it under sixes or under eights. The first team was really the under 10s. I'm probably going up there whenever I was maybe about 8 years of age, being dropped off there every Friday night, and then playing matches on Saturdays and blitzes on Saturdays. Probably my first coach would have been a senior player at the time, Paul Breen, who 30 years later is still involved in coaching in Ciarán with the underage girls. And basically, it would have just been a case of meeting friends at under 10 and friends now that you still have 30 years later. And then obviously going back to my brother-in-law, Con, probably the first main memory outside of the club would have been Con taking me and my brother and quite a few other people to like county matches, sort of down matches at that time. Because obviously he was a down man and he was married to my sister, so he was the only one really with a car. And I remember going to a match in Clonus in a wee green Fiat Uno. I think there were 7 of us in it. So it wasn't a pleasant experience going down to Clonus with 7 people in a Fiat Uno.
Yeah, I'd say so.
And did you play right up the minors then, Ronan?
I underage right up to minors, Hod, and I would have played very, very briefly for the senior team. The senior career really didn't take off, to be honest. Whenever I was final year minor, I was actually captain of the minor team, and the 2 managers at that stage would have been 2 men called Joe Garvey and Martin Kelly, and they took me into the senior team as a final year minor and probably played about 3 or 4 league games that year. And then the next year, which would have been 2000, would have been my first year fully fledged into the senior team. Again, would have started maybe the first 3 or 4 league games of the season, but then a more seasoned and more experienced player who hadn't really decided to come back until about April time came back in and sort of took my position, and sort of really from there I just decided that playing wasn't really for me. And then the next year, 2001, my minor and under 16 manager, a man called Mark Tegg, who would have been probably very, very influential in my coaching career and getting involved in the Gaelic, asked me to come in and help him train the under 16 team. So as a 19-year-old, as a 20-year-old, I was actually training our under 16 club team along with Mark. And we actually went on and we won the county championship that year. We won the North Armagh League and the North Armagh Championship, and then that qualified you. There was no sort of Division 1, Division 2, Division 3 then. It was more sort of regional, and that qualified us for the county semi-final, where we beat Armagh Harps, and then the county final we beat Cullyhanna. So probably that first year in terms of management, everything, or coaching at that stage, everything really seemed simple to me, and I was sort of saying to myself, Christ, this is easy. and now here I am 20 years later still doing it, and it hasn't got any easier.
Yeah. And with in terms of playing and the coaching, like there wasn't any injuries or anything, did you just sort of say to yourself that you just couldn't be bothered with the commitment side of things, and you just like the management more, or what sort of?
It wasn't really the commitment, Brad, because at that stage I was up in university in Belfast, and there would have been quite a few of the senior players at that stage would have been working in Belfast, and they would have taken the younger players under their wings, and actually John Mallon, who would have been one of the more senior players at that time, would have collected me outside Queen's Student Union there every Tuesday and took me down to training.
Hatfield.
And then after training, would have took me around to his mum and dad's house, and would have got a big dinner. It was the only good dinner I got that week, until I got home at the weekend. So certainly commitment wasn't really an issue. It just sort of fell into place that year, where I sort of left the panel halfway through the year in 2000. And then, as I said, Mark Tagg had asked me to come in and give him a hand with the under-16 team the year after. And we got a wee bit of success. So obviously, whenever you got a bit of success as a coach or manager, you still had your buzz, you still had the link to the club. So didn't really feel any inclination to go back and try and play for the senior team,
Yeah. And after the success that you found at the start, what way did it go from there then? Was it, did you stick with that age group? Did you stick with under-16s, the minors, for a while, or how did it progress from there?
Yeah, well, in and around that stage, I was in and around the start of the Paul McGuire tournament up in Dromore. Mm-hmm. Do you remember the Throne Minor died in the accident, or died in the collision with playing for Armagh? Yeah. So his club had started Ulster Championship for all the under-16 winners of the various teams in Ulster. So we played Derry Gonley from Fermanagh in that tournament. We drew with them the first day, and then it went to a replay. The tournaments weren't really as well sort of organised as what they were now. It wasn't an official Ulster tournament. Mm-hmm. So needless to say, whenever we went up to play Derry Gonley the week after, there was about 8 or 9 different players playing who hadn't played the week before. And they ended up beating us. And then, as you said, 2002, 2003, me and Mark followed that team up to minor level. And our club has never won a minor championship. We've been in 4 or 5 finals over the years. So we were sort of trying to target a minor championship, but probably one main thing happened us then, at the fact that one of our best players, and probably our best forward, who was worth maybe 8 or 9 points a game, a fella called Paul Ciarán, he got a youth contract with Preston North End over in England, playing soccer. So basically, after that under-16 year, Paul sort of went over to England for 3 or 4 years, and he would have been a massive miss out of that minor team. And incidentally, 2 years after that, so we won the under-16 in 2001, and in 2003, the minor champions were Armagh Harps, who we would have beaten in the semi-final in 2001. And the Harps actually went on that year and won the Ulster Minor tournament up in St. Paul's in Belfast. So it's sort of put into context to us maybe how big an achievement it was 2 years before winning the under-16s.
Yeah, it's probably hard knowing that if you had your guy in the team, like, you would have made that difference probably, and could have been used there.
It certainly would have been a help, and you sort of look back on, like, we've got the minor final since. We got the minor final in 2010, and we probably should have won that. We were leading by 3 or 4 points at half time and ended up getting beaten. I wasn't involved in that team. Mark was the manager of that team as well. So, as you said, really looking back on it now, it sort of seems an opportunity maybe to pass us by at that stage, but you could do nothing about it. The young lad went over to try and get a career out of soccer, so you can't do anything about it really,
Yeah, that ended up leading you into a few of the development squads and all in Armagh, Ronan, didn't it? Working with them teams.
In around that time, Hod, I was asked at under 14 level in Armagh at that stage. It was divisional, North Armagh, Mid Armagh, South Armagh. So I was asked to come in by a man called Jerry Cunningham, who's still involved in the development squads in Armagh. He would be like a great coach and a great GM, and he's chairman of Clonmore, which would be a small country club, sort of out around Mahry, Loughgall direction. And he asked me to come in with the under 14 North Armagh, which I did for a year. And then that actually led on then to the county under 15 development squad the year after. And then I went to Liverpool then to do my teaching, do my PGCE, and then obviously whenever I was in Liverpool I couldn't do the development squads, and then I've never really had any sort of inclination or desire to go back to them, to be honest, because ever since then I've been taking senior teams, and I think whenever you're out of the loop at underage, you need to be coaching an underage team to be involved in those development squads. You have to know the players, I think.
Yeah.
Well, you built up a brave bit of experience there in the first few years, Ronan, with underage teams, and then with the Armagh development teams, and then that brought you on to your first senior job.
Yeah, well, actually, before I took a senior team in Ireland here in 2005, I went out to Boston to train Armagh Notre Dame senior team out in Boston. And it didn't just get my name from anywhere. The link there was obviously Armagh Notre Dame, so obviously it's a link to Armagh. And in the late 90s, my brother and 5 or 6 of his mates had emigrated to America, emigrated to Boston, and the area that they were staying in was a place called Brighton. And there was a team there called Notre Dame, but it was about to fold. So the boys came in and basically took the club over and sort of kept the senior team going, and they took me out in 2005 to coach the senior team, and we ended up getting to the Boston Championship final that year, and we're beaten by a very good Aidan McAnesby's team in the final. Like some of the players there, you'll know some of the players like Damien Rafferty from Uri Shamrocks was out that year playing cornerback. Paul Murphy from Ballyholland was out that year playing centre halfback. I think certainly D started the 2010 final. I think Paul might have been in the squad.
Paul would have been in around the squad then, yeah.
And then obviously you had other players like Christy Toy from Donegal, an Ireland winner in 2012. He played for us that year as well. So like you were coaching high level players out in America, great experience.
In America, was it a case where you were working as well, and the coaching was sort of like a secondary thing, or was it straight out and straight into the coaching, and then once that was over, you were back home? Or
well, I was taken out, Brad, to train the team, and I ended up I wouldn't say working. I'd say if you ask Conor McKeever, he gave me the job, whether he got much work out of me, I'd say it was questionable.
Yeah.
But yes, I was out for the summer there, and at that stage I had just qualified as a teacher, so I was starting in St Malachy's Castlewellan in September of 2005. So I had no income over the July and August whenever I was out. So whenever you were out there, you were working as a painter, basically as a labourer, the painters, for the summer, and you got I think it was $480 or $500 a week, whatever. No, $600 a week. You got $120 a day, which in 2005, I suppose, for somebody who was 24 years of age, wasn't bad.
Yeah, because I know some of the other fellas went out to America, sort of like similar stuff, and they were out helping with some of the teams, but they were having to sort of juggle work and then the coaching and then the whole social aspect of it as well over in America, which I'm sure was great.
See in 2005, Ronan, I know Gaelic football's got a whole lot better over there now, and different teams and teams bringing players over, like the likes of the team that brought over Dermot Connolly in Boston and all. What was the standard like then in 2005? Like, was it just sort of like a mess about, or was it still pretty a decent enough standard? Because I know it's very good now.
Yes, I think people have the wrong impression of football in America. People think they just go out and it's basically out for a holiday, you know.
Uh-huh.
The standard of football in Boston, I would say, would be as good, if not better, than any senior championship in Ulster.
Uh-huh.
Like I would, like say for example, that Wolf Tones team, I'm sure maybe come on to that later on, that Wolf Tones team I would have trained 2015, 2016. Like I would have fancied that team against, you know, any of the teams over here, your Ballinderries, your Kilcoos, your Crossmaglen. I'm not saying they would have beaten them, you know, because obviously those clubs have probably a stronger connection, but like the standard of football and the facilities out in Canton, which is the Irish Cultural Centre in Boston, like they're unbelievable. They've a full-size pitch, two sort of smaller pitches for ladies football or junior football, and a massive complex and stands and all on each side. Like the stand, even in 2005, had like some of the players are named there, like straight away. You have three players there I've just named who's played in the All-Ireland final.
Uh-huh.
You know, Christy Toy, Paul Murphy, and Dee Rafferty. You know, and probably that McAnespy's team that beat us in the final, probably the main man on that team would have been Mark Little from Fermanagh.
Yeah.
So again, like you're talking. I know obviously maybe it wasn't a success for the county, but at that stage, Mark Little would have been one of the best forwards in Ulster, you know.
So, Ronan, you said you came home and you started in Somalagis in Castlewellan. Did you get involved in football there? Because Somalagis would be a big footballing school. You know,
Yeah,
have won the second level of the All Ireland and stuff like that. There, vocational schools, I should say.
Yeah, as you say, like whenever I started in St Malachy's, I was only there 2 years. I was in two 1-year posts, so I was there 2 years, which was started in 2005. And PJ McGee from Leitrim was the head of PE then, and Paul Duffin then from the town was also a PE teacher there as well. And fair play to PJ and Paul. You know, they always got other teachers involved in the school. You know, it wasn't just the PE teachers taking the team. PJ basically was involved in every team. Mm-hmm. Like PJ stayed behind 5 days a week, taking the under 14s, the under 16s, and the post 16s. You know, so the 2 years I was in Castlewellan, I helped PJ with the Marquee Cup team, which was the under 18 or under 19 team. Mm-hmm. I think the best we got to in the first year, I think we got to the semi-final of Ulster. Probably the main man involved in that team would have been Kevin Duffin, who has been in and around the county team. And again, we, in my first year in Castlewellan, the under 16s, won the vocational All-Ireland. And players on that team would have been Paul Devlin, who's obviously instrumental now for Kilcoo. You know, Jared McAnulty, who I think originally was with St John's, but I think he's maybe with Leitrim now.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
A good player as well. So, and then after my 2 years in Castlewellan, I left and went to another school closer to home. And I just knew myself that I was going to regret not being there the year after with the under 18s. Mm-hmm. And needless to say that the 2 years after I left, the under 18s won the All-Ireland twice. They won the Marquee Cup and then won the All-Ireland twice. Mm-hmm. I actually, because at that stage, TG Kelleher would have been showing the Marquee Cup final on St Patrick's Day. Sorry, the All-Ireland Vocational Schools final on St Patrick's Day, you know, before the club finals. Mm-hmm. So I remember sitting in the club watching Castlewellan win those 2 All-Irelands and watching the players that you trained a wee bit for the couple of years before, and just being delighted for PJ, you know, because like PJ, I don't know if you know him, but an absolute gentleman, and you know, totally dedicated to the development of players in St Malachy's, you know, right throughout his whole coaching career there. And again, PJ would be a man probably I would have learned a lot from in those 2 years, you know.
So that then led on to your first senior job then, Ronan, whenever you get home then too?
Yeah, so in the first senior job was with my own club, Ciarán here in 2007. So again, I would only have been 26 then. And looking back in hindsight at that year, it was a great learning experience for me in terms of going forward, because I probably, discipline-wise, probably let a lot of players away with more than what I should have, just because I didn't have the experience. like we had, like, I've had this conversation with some people involved in that team. Like, I reckon that Ciarán Oak team in 2007, now in Armagh, would possibly be competing, certainly in the round semi-final stage of a senior championship. Whenever you look at the standard now and you look back at the players that were available then, we had a very, very good group of players. Probably I let them down a bit in terms of not being experienced enough, but we actually had, with a very good championship run that year, we played, I think it was 4 games in the championship that year. We played Clann, who I know the club there has links to the clans there with the Campbells. We played Clann in the first round of the championship in 2007, and Clans had got to the county final the year before. That was whenever James Morrison and Bumpy O'Hagan would have quit Armagh and would have went and played for their club to try and sort of topple Cross at that stage. Obviously, there's always been a big rivalry there between Cross and Clans. So we were drawn against sort of the finalists from the year before in the first round. And Brad had mentioned there about, some of the high points in your career, like the 2 matches that we played against Clann in Mahary in 2007. Like, I would love there to have been a video of the 2 matches to look back on them now. The quality of the football from both teams. The first match was a draw. Second match was a draw. Went to extra time. I think the final score was Ciarán Oak 0-20, Clans 2-13. So it's a high. It really, really was. Probably in terms of any matches I've been involved in, it was probably a higher standard. 2 teams going toe to toe, for 140 minutes over the 2 games.
As you say too, Ronan, like 2006 or 2007, like you're only 26. Like, that would have been hard. Like, a lot of them lads you would have been playing football with, all through your underage career, and then all of a sudden you were telling them what to do. And sometimes players get this into their head, what does he know? He never even played for Ciarán Oak seniors. What's he telling me? So that would have been very hard for you, I'd say.
Yeah. And then, as you say, you had boys who had played with at underage, and then you had boys who were 5 or 6 or 7 years old on, boys in around 32, 33, who had been great servants to the club, had been brilliant senior players. But again, at that time, I was trying to bring through sort of some of the lads from the 2001 under-16 team. So I was sort of 6 years later, so I was trying to bring through maybe some of the younger lads that I had been coaching, and maybe, as you say, some of the older lads maybe didn't feel well or didn't sit right with them, that maybe some of the younger lads were being played ahead of them, But at that stage, the fella helping me that year was a man called Brian Neeson, who had recently retired from the senior team. So really, whenever it came to dealing with the older players, if there was any disconsent or any discipline issues, it was really BJ looked after that, as opposed to me, because he's sort of more of an axe over them,
And did you feel any pressure to take it, or were you afraid to sort of not take it, because it's your home club, or how did that all come about?
Well, the way it came about was actually, I mentioned there Paul Ciarán playing for me in the boy went to Preston. His father would have been treasurer of the club at that stage, would have been a great clubman. And I actually took Paul out to Boston with me in 2005, out to play for Armagh. So Paul's father, Michael, and the whole family came out to Boston to watch the final. So I think Michael sort of had it in his head that, this fellow maybe has a bit of potential about him. So the management team in 2006, which was the year before I took, were 2 outsiders, 2 boys from Dungannon. So they didn't stay on for the other year. So Michael had asked me if I would be interested, and I said I would, and sort of that's everything from there is sort of history,
Yeah.
You had 2 Armagh players within the Ciarán Oak team too, Ronan. You had Brian Mallon, who for years played for Armagh. He was one of the first names in the team sheet, and actually was playing against us in the friendly last year. So I remember, you remember the face, like he was always a great player for Armagh. and he's actually head of the finance for Ulster GAA at the minute.
That's great, yeah.
And then you also had Andrew McCann, who won an All Ireland with Armagh in 2002. Was it great having that good bit of experience as well?
But see, at that time, Brian certainly played for us. Brian's manager of the senior team now. At that stage in 2007, Andrew wasn't playing for Ciarán at that stage. Andrew was living down in Dublin.
Right.
So Andrew, at that stage, he might have been playing for Ballyboden or somebody down in Dublin. I think Andrew played for us. Maybe up to about 1999 or 2000. Because
there's my research out the window
there. In 2001, Ciarán won the intermediate championship, and Andrew wasn't playing in that team, but had been beaten in the 98 final. And Andrew was playing then. So at that stage, I never had the pleasure of coaching Andrew, but certainly, as you say, like Brian Mallon, Jesus, in terms of being a manager, like the man's got 4 Ulster titles, I think, maybe a Division 1, Division 2 league with Armagh, as you say there, for a period in the mid-2000s and even into the late 2000s, Brian will have been one of the first names in the Armagh team sheet, So certainly it was a pleasure to coach Brian, and then even whenever I went back for the second and third stint, Brian was still playing,
Just when you say then, how did that year finish up, Ronan, and what way was it left? Because then I think you went on to Armagh then after that, didn't you?
Yeah, 2007, as I said, we got a decent championship run, and being realistic, we probably should have got to the semi-final of the senior championship that year. After we beat the Clans, we played Ciarán. And again, that match went to a replay, and we had a free kick at the very end. I'm not going to name the fellow that missed it, but he would have played for Armagh as well at the stage 2, with a free kick at the very end to probably win the match by a point in the first match. And unfortunately, he pulled the free kick wide, and then we were beaten in the replay. But as you say, sort of in terms of the league, then the league really just filtered out. At that stage, you had 22 league games, which because at that stage the championship started early. The Clans matches were in May, so we were out of the championship by say the middle of June. So you really had you maybe had 14 or 15 league games after that still to play, and it really was a case of the season just filtered out, and we ended up actually being relegated from Division 1 that year. So it was again sort of probably one of the reasons why I went back 5 years later then to manage the senior team again, sort of to right that wrong of getting the club relegated in 2007.
Yeah, but that's saying you went on to Armagh then after that.
Yes, again, Armagh would be a local club, sort of about 6 or 7 miles away from us. And again, Armagh sort of came about through the development squads that Hod had mentioned earlier. Whenever I was involved with North Armagh, there was a fella called Stevie McConville, who was an Armagh man who was involved in coaching that team as well. And Stevie just happened to phone me up one night and said, "Look, I hear you've stepped down from Ciarán. Would you be interested in giving me a hand with Armagh, the next year?" So at that stage, Armagh were Division 3 in Armagh. At that stage, there was 4 divisions in Armagh then. Armagh were Division 3, so I went out with Stevie for a year in Armagh. And again, you had an All-Ireland winner playing there as well. You had Shane Smith, who would have been a squad player with Armagh in 2002, was involved with Armagh. And then you'll probably know the next name, Gavin McGilly, who is a coach of Down at the minute. Gavin was involved in playing on the team at that stage as well. Gavin would have suffered a real bad hip injury, sort of, and maybe the year before I arrived, and sort of played probably about half the games that year, but you could tell that Gavin was going to be a success and just a real interest in Gaelic, So as you say, I was with Armagh then that year in 2008. So
then that brought you on to Cranchco.
Yeah.
So that was just outside Newry. You spent about 3 years with them, or 3 or 2 years?
Yeah, I was with Cranchco for 3 years. Hod, again, how that developed was that sort of linked back to 2005 out in Boston. One of the home-based players, which is one of the players who lived in Boston, was a fella called Jerry O'Reilly, who again would have been in and around the Armagh squad. played for, I think it was Jordanstown he played for, would have been a very, very good player. You know, so he had actually came home and his local club was Corinchico. So he asked me if I would come down, and I was actually coaching and managing them. And again, really, I used Corinchico as a sort of learning curve. You know, as I said earlier on, in 2007, it maybe jumped in too deep with Ciarán in Division 1. You know, you were playing teams like Drummond T and Cross and Harps and Mahary, Pearse Oaks, teams at the top level. And maybe I'm not saying maybe, definitely I was out of my depth at that stage, you know. So I sort of decided that I would take a step back and maybe go down to sort of lower levels and try and build my way up and build experience. So I was with Corinchico for 3 years, and basically whenever I would have arrived at Corinchico, there would have been the second worst team in Armagh. You would have had Fell Brady's, and then you would have had Corinchico. They hadn't won a championship match since 1982. You know what I mean? It really was like, whenever I went down there at the start, it really was probably just slightly above a pub team.
Yeah.
You know, but there was great committee men involved, and they were pushing the underage at that stage. And I was there for 3 years, and I think it was possibly the second year I got into the semi-final of the junior championship, where we were beaten by Grange, who sort of over the last 3 or 4 years have been competing at senior level in Armagh, you know. So certainly Corinchico was a great sort of learning curve for me in terms of trying to progress a team from a low level and try and get them up sort of half competing at junior level, you know.
Yeah, it's definitely a team you hear of now. Like, and they've got a great setup there. They've got a great pitch. You can just see it off the Duke Carriageway there, just off near the Dublin Road. But they definitely, you sort of like, I would say to Brad there, you would sort of like in Corinchico to what Atlas and Finn were and down.
Yes.
Like Atlas and
Yes.
Finn are now a Division 3 team, and if there would have been a proper year, you'd imagined they would have competed very well with the team that they had, you know. So Corinchico were now up there. That's where you brought Corinchico to.
Yeah, you actually mentioned that, listener Finn. That would have been a team that we would have played in challenge matches in around those years as well, you know. And as you say, whenever I left Corinchico, they did go from strength to strength, and I think trying to think of a year, I think it was maybe 2016 that got to the junior championship final. And they were beaten then by, I think, Ballyhagan, who's a local team from here as well. So certainly, as you say, in terms of facilities, grants, developments, underage and their senior team, they certainly are a club over the last 10 years who's made great improvements, you know.
Yeah, I would drive past the pitch when I was back at work. So they've got a big new clubhouse and all going on. But I actually seen one of your post-match interviews. I think it was maybe 2010, but Danny Cinnamon, I worked with him, so he would sort of be the only one I would know of a few other friends who play at the minute, but it would have been before your time, not that I'm saying.
Yes, that Danny's a good character, and I mean, him would still keep in touch, you know, 10 years later. And then you would have his brother Sean would have played as well, his older brother. Danny would have been very young then. Danny maybe would only have been about 19 or 20. And sort of played him between wing, half forward, or midfield. A decent player, but again, there was the influence of soccer there too. I think he played for Bestbrook maybe in the soccer. You know, he played at a decent level at the soccer too, you know.
How did Corinchico come to an end? Were you just after your 3 years, were you like, I've done enough here? And
basically, Brad, there, as you say, after the 3 years, it was, I think the first year was a quarter final, second year was a semi final, third year was a quarter final. And as you say, really, it was just a case of, you know, I'm driving from Portadown up to Newry as well, 3 nights a week, you know, sort of takes its toll too. So sort of like 3 years, if you look at the sort of record there, and maybe just it started with Corinchico, sort of 3 years seems to be, like, I think 3 years is the lifespan of certainly myself as a Gaelic manager, you know. Sort of takes you the first year to mould a team, second year to sort of know what you're looking and get a wee bit of success. Maybe then the third year, it's just a matter of trying to consolidate that, you know.
And then was it a case of Tiernan Og came back looking you, or you came back knocking Tiernan Og's door saying, look, I'm ready to come back?
No, in 2012, was actually a few of the players would have came to me and asked me to go back. In 2011. We got to the intermediate championship final, and were well beaten in the final by Cullaville. And then the manager that year, for family commitments and work commitments, he was a club man, couldn't commit or didn't want to take it on in 2012. So then a few of the players would have came to me, and I accepted the post in 2012, and I took. At that stage, I would have been working in Carrickmore, where I'm working now, and Pierce Oaks in Armagh in 2009 won the Armagh Senior Championship. The beat Cross in the quarter final, and their manager was a man called Brenton Hughes, who was originally from Armagh, was a school teacher in Derry. And then the coach of that team would have been a Pierce Oaks man called Paddy Toner. And Paddy worked with me. So whenever I went in 2012, I had sort of encouraged Paddy and coached Paddy into coming in and helping me. So 2012, 13, 14, Paddy would have been the coach, I would have been the manager, and then I would have had 3 or 4 other club men help me each year, you know.
Yeah, well, that's just looking at it. 2012, I don't really have much wrote down about it, but I'm assuming you were just getting to know the squad again, getting your feet settled. In 2013, you went undefeated in the league and you were beating the championship final. So it was very, very successful in terms of that.
Yeah, 2012, actually, we had to win. At that stage, there was 3 divisions in Armagh: senior, intermediate, and junior, and there was 16 teams in each league. And in 2012, you played your 15 games, and then the league split into a top 8 and a bottom 8. So we actually finished in the bottom 8 in that first year. And actually, on the last day of the season, we actually had to beat College Land to secure. But we were probably going to be safe anyhow, but we needed to beat College Land on the last day of the league in 2012 to basically secure that we were going to be an intermediate team the year after, which is a good job we did, because as you said, in 2013 we won the league. The league changed then in 2013 just to a one-way league of 15 games. There wasn't a split. So we went undefeated in those 15 games. I think it was maybe 13 wins and 2 draws. And then, as you said, a championship then kicked in, and we got to the final of the championship. At that stage, there was actually a couple of Division 1 teams in the intermediate championship in Armagh. You had Shane O'Neill's from Camla, and you had St. Paul's from Lurgan. We beat both those teams along the way to the final. And then in the final, Madden ended up beating us in the final. And there was a lot of controversy over a refereeing display that day, but I'm not going into any further details, and that was a sore one.
And did you think what was the change in mood from 2012, like you say, winning that last game to keep your intermediate status, to then 2013 going undefeated in the league and losing out at the final hurdle in the championship final? What was different, or was it attitude of the players, or did you do anything different, or?
Well, there's probably a couple of things there, Hod, as I said, or Brad, in 2007, as I said, when everyone did the first time, I sort of thought I was very inexperienced, and discipline, I thought, was a major failing of me in 2007. So in 2012, whenever I went back, I sort of promised myself I wouldn't make the same mistakes again. So we got the discipline sorted, and we actually agreed, or the players agreed, a set of rules and sanctions at the start of the year. And I think by the end of that 2012 year, I had maybe asked 4 or 5 players to leave the panel for discipline issues. So whenever we came back in 2013, those 4 or 5 players were welcomed back in with open arms, but it was a clean slate. And everybody sort of knew that maybe I'd shown my teeth a wee bit in 2012 in terms of discipline. And as you said, 2013, the buy-in was very good. And plus the training program that Paddy Toner had put in place in 2012, the fitness levels were really only beginning to show in 2013. And whenever the lads came back at the start of 2013, they could see a major improvement in their fitness from the year before, which again, I think got a good bit of buy-in from the players, you know.
Then that led on to, did you take a year out, Ronan, and then No,
yeah,
sorry,
2015.
2015. Then you went back over to America.
Yeah, 2015. I was with Ciarán Oak for 3 years, and then I said we got promoted into the senior league in 2014. It kept them up 2014, so to me it was sort of a natural cutoff point, to step away. And I would sort of be quite mental in terms of if I think I haven't done something, I want to go back and achieve it, So to me, 2005, losing the Boston Championship final really was still a big bugbear with me that we hadn't won it, So in 2015, I had no plans to do anything. And then come April time, I was twiddling my thumbs and I was bored out of my head. So I contacted one of my friends in Boston, Conor McKeever, who would have played in that 2005 team. And at that stage, Armagh were only a junior team. They didn't have a senior team. So I couldn't go back out to Armagh, Notre Dame. So I said to Conor, I says, look, I want to go out to Boston here in the summer. I want a team who's going to be competing. And I don't want to go into a big club. Like the Donegal there in Boston would be a big, big club. I wanted to go in where I could sort of have a bit of a say, and small enough club, which was what Armagh was like the year before in 2005. So Conor got me in touch with a man called Jerry Pryor from Cavan, who was basically the founder of a team called Wolf Tones in Boston. And I went out to Boston again in 2015. And again, there were some great players, on that 2015 team. Like you're talking, at that stage, you were talking probably 4 of the Cavan starters were playing that year. You had Conor Moyna, you had Darren McVitie, you had Padraig Faulkner, you had Michael Argue, with Tomás O'Connor from Kildare, with Sean George at that stage, who was a panelist with Dublin a couple of years before whenever they had won the All-Ireland. So I went back out in 2015 to Boston and I trained their senior team and their junior team. And both teams got to the final. The junior team beat Donegal. Whenever I mean junior, you're sort of talking like reserves, sort of the reserve team, So the junior team won the Boston Championship, beating Donegal in the final by a point. And then sort of 2 hours later that same afternoon, the seniors played Donegal in the final. And again, it went the extra time and we ended up being beaten by a point. And I actually had to catch a 9 o'clock flight that night from Logan Airport. And I think the match finished at about 20-7. So it was, and you're sort of 45 or 50 minutes from the airport. So it was just straight after the final, straight into the Jeep and taken straight to the airport and go home, back and work the next day.
Was the standard even up higher from what I had mentioned before from 2005?
Yeah, I would imagine the standard in terms of the away-based players, which are the players that you bring out from Ireland Hall, probably would have been higher.
Yeah.
But in 2005, the Armagh team that I trained would have had a better home-based players than what Wolf Tones would have had, because at that stage, obviously, 20 years ago or 15 years ago, there was more Irish in America.
Yeah.
Whereas by 2015, all the Irish were emigrating to Australia. So sort of the home-based sort of players in America, sort of 2015, 2016, were down off a wee bit. But you still had 4 or 5 really, really good home-based players. Probably the captain of that team in 2015, I'm sure you will know him, you might know his brother, was Marty Farrell from Annaclone.
Yeah.
He's Collie Farrell's brother.
That's right, yeah.
Marty was living in Boston at that stage, and he's married out there now. I think he went to Chicago for a couple of years, but I think he's back in Boston now. And Marty was as good as any of the away-based players that we had that year. Marty was a fantastic player,
Yeah, Marty played a bit of down minors and stuff, so he did. If Marty would have been over here, he'd have been Annaclone's main player.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. He had to play down seniors.
Set up too.
Yeah, he definitely would have been playing on the down seniors. He was that good of a player. I remember him playing minor, and he was always a nifty wee player.
He was very nimble and small, but he was hardy as well.
Yeah. So then you went back, and then you took Ciarán again. Started with Ciarán 2016.
I was asked back for 2016 as well, because 2015 with another club man came in and managed, and then at the end of the year, he decided he wasn't going to come back for 2016. So again, Ciarán were still in Division 1 at that stage. But in 2016 in Armagh, the Division 1 changed, where it went into 1A and 1B. They basically split it into 2 groups of 8. So, as you said, Brian Mallon and Paul Carville would have came to me and basically would have sold it to me that we were in 1B that year, and we possibly had a chance of pushing on and maybe trying to compete to win Division 1B. But I always had it in the head after losing that final in 2015 that I would go back out to America again in 2016 to give the Tones one more chance. So that had all been arranged over the winter. Like that final was that 2015 final was on the last Sunday in August. And come November time again, November of 2015, Jerry Pryor, Darren Duffy, George McCarthy, the people out in Boston, and myself over here, we were starting to look at players again for 2016. So I had in my head, and it was confirmed that I was going to Boston again in 2016. So whenever the lads came to me, I had to have a meeting with the players and a meeting with the committee, and basically told them, look, come the 1st of July here, I'm going back out to America. If you're happy for me to manage the team from January until the 1st of July, and then whenever I come back at the end of August, come back in, and if you're happy with that, I'm more than willing to give you a hand. So the committee and the players were happy with that, Hod. So what I did then was I got a really, really strong backroom team set in place for that year in Ciarán, knowing that on the 1st of July, I was going out to America. So Paddy Toner was still there as coach, with club men like Andrew Neeson, Brian Carville, Mickey Breen, with sort of 4 or 5 men helping me. And I was confident that those lads, whenever I left, were more than able to take the team, And we ended up actually winning 2 games in a week against the Greens to maintain our Division 1 status. And I remember, like, you look at technology now, I remember at the time there was a players meeting upstairs in the club before one of the matches, and I was actually on my phone phoning one of the players, and he had his phone plugged into a loudspeaker. So we were basically having like a Zoom meeting then, through a phone call.
Yeah.
And I was going through the Greens team, who's marking who's doing what, and the players were asking you questions, and looking back on it now, it was surreal, but sort of looking back on it now, it's very common now, sort of, online and stuff. So the boys kept them up that year, and then we actually beat Greenmore in the senior championship that year, which would have been just before I came home from America. And at that stage, then the reward for that was Crossmaglen in the next round. So Brad mentioned there about the low points of your career. Certainly, this was the lowest point of my career. We played Crossmaglen in the athletic grounds, and it would be like, the round 2 of down at the minute, where it would be like, if you lost, you still had another backdoor match.
Yeah.
It was sort of in around that standard, and Gareth O'Neill was managing Cross at that year, and the likes of Oisin O'Neill, his son, was a young player. And I remember, I'll never forget the final scoreline: 6 goals and 21 points to not 8. So we're beat by 31 points. So I'll never forgive Gareth O'Neill for this, because at that stage, they maybe had 3 or 4 of their main men on the bench at that stage, because it was an early round. They were trying to pick them, obviously, for later on in the championship. And like maybe with 20-25 minutes to go, they were winning by 20 points, and they were bringing Oisin O'Neill on, and they were bringing maybe Stephen Kiernan on at that stage. And then just saying to myself, Christ, would like, it's probably typical Cross and typical good teams. Whenever they've got the foot in the throat, they just keep it on it, And Christ, they really drilled it into us that night, and it was probably the lowest point of my coaching career.
Yeah.
No, that would have been a hard one to take now.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on ahead.
It takes some of those nights where you think you're going great, and then next minute you're just going, what have I done wrong here? But sometimes players and all too, it gives them a bit of a wake up call as well. Like,
Yes, well, probably it was probably actually the death nail in terms of us as a senior team, because the next year, 2017, then the club was actually relegated from senior football into intermediate, and sort of been there ever since, you know. So probably in terms of that group of players, you know, from sort of 2012, no, probably from about 2010 onwards, it was probably the finishing of them in terms of being a senior team, you know. But certainly the club are at intermediate level now and are competing very well at intermediate, you know.
But just closing off in 2016, so you ended up, you won the championship with Boston Wolf Tones over there.
Yeah, that's right. And in 2016, we went out and there was major effort put in, because that was Wolf Tones' third final in a row. They'd been beaten in 14 the year before I was out, and then beaten by Donegal in 15. So the club men were adamant that they were going to make a big push that year. And we got some great players in, like with Kevin O'Brien from Dublin, centre half back. I think can't remember who was it. He was one of the famous players. He bit somebody in the chest in a match playing for Dublin.
Yeah, I can picture him now. He was a hard out player.
So you had Kevin O'Brien there. You had Paddy Keenan, who was an all-star in 2010 from Louth. You had Leighton Glynn, who played for Ireland three different series in the compromise rules. You know, Shawnee Furlong, who's the captain of Wicklow now. Like Tomas O'Connor couldn't get in the team. You know, he played full forward for Kildare for years and couldn't get in the team that year. So it was a really big effort put in. And then we actually had Jason Ryan. Do you remember managed Wexford?
Wexford, yeah.
He managed Wexford in 2008 whenever they beat Armagh in the All-Ireland quarter-final. Jason Ryan is a vice principal down in Waterford. So he actually came out with his family for the summer, and me and him were coaching the team. So again, like, there was no expense spared that year in terms of trying to get the cup. And thank God they did win it. It was first and only time so far that they've won it, you know.
Like, that's some team you're saying there. Like, you think of the players like Paddy Keenan, like, if he would play in any other big team, you know, he played for Louth, but he was brilliant. He was very good. He was great at taking a score from midfield for, like, it was uncalled for a Louth man to win an All-Star.
Yeah.
You know, and you talk about Leighton Glynn too. You know, they talk about, like, Benny Coulter, if he played for Kerry or whatever, he would have an All-Ireland. Leighton Glynn would have an All-Ireland. You know, he was that good. I remember him playing international rules.
Yeah,
he was one of Ireland's best players in them years.
Yeah, see, even if you say about it, Hod, see in terms of all the players I have managed, and again, probably you're looking at the county players for the various clubs and out in America. Leighton Glynn, to me, is head and shoulders the best player that I've ever coached. He was absolutely outstanding, playing centre half forward, just controlled the game. And as you said, if he was playing for Dublin or Kerry or even Meath at that stage, he would have had All-Ireland medals, you know.
Yeah, no, he was a very good player.
With the group of players, Ronan, did you have much of an influence in getting men out, or was that the sort of the people in the background, the committees, or what way does that whole side of it work? Because you always hear, like, well, I'll have her, like Malachy McGee and Liam Delvin, our own club men, they have had stints out in America. But I'm always wondering what is going on in the background to get it all sorted, or do you know what?
You get the J1s in.
Generally speaking, Brad, it would be the committee members and the club members out there, you know. Like, say, for example, like Jerry Pryor, who I mentioned, was from Cavan. Charles McCarthy was from Meath, who was involved. Frank Gillespie's from Westmeath. Darren Duffy's from Donegal. So they sort of had players from, you know, Gary Brilly from Kildare. They sort of had people involved in the club from nearly all four provinces in Ireland, you know, and they obviously had contacts at home and maybe contacts through county under 21 managers or county. Like, I can always laugh. See whenever you're out in America, or see whenever you're involved in a team and you hear of a player retiring from the county team.
That's when
you know, like, say for example, Jamie Clark retires from Armagh. You see the buzz that will go about all the clubs in America getting contacts with each other. Can we get them out? Phone calls being made. Like, I remember sitting with Darren Duffy one day driving into the city, and we already had our team process at this stage, but the two brothers from Roscommon, oh Christ, can't remember their name.
Kilbride, is it?
No, Desi, somebody. There's two brothers from Roscommon. I've been playing recently, and just so like I was sitting in the van, and Darren Duffy was talking to one of the brothers, trying to encourage him if he would come out. And then whenever Aidan McAnespy's here that you're on to these boys, or Donegal here that you're on to them, they approached them then too,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So like it really is a phenomenal amount of work from the committee members and the club members out in America to put their team together. And then, as you said, Brad, you said about me bringing players out. Like every year, I've been out 3 years, and every year I've took one player out with me. And I was always adamant with the players I brought out. I would have told him, I says, look, you're getting no money here. I says, you're getting your flights, you're getting accommodation free for 2 months, and you're getting a job. And I says, you're going to have the best summer of your life.
Yeah.
So in 2005, I took Paul Carville out with me. He had come home from Preston at that stage, and he came out and played for Armagh in 2005. 2015, then I took Conor McCormick from my young club. He would sort of be in and around one of the more senior players in the senior team now. He came out and played left half back that year. And sort of like whenever you talk about competition, like Conor McCormick had never played for Armagh, even at underage level. And Conor McCormick was competing against players like Conor Moyna and Darren McVitie for his position at left half back, Yeah. And he was able to hold his own. Like Darren McVitie played for us that year, but he actually went home after the semi-final. And we had been playing Darren McVitie in the half-forward line that year. And then in the semi-final, McVitie was moved back to left half-back and Conor was dropped to the semi-final, which I thought was a bit harsh. But then after the semi-final, McVitie went home that week. And I basically had to phone Conor on the Monday and say, look, McVitie's going home today. You're going to be starting this final next Sunday. Get the head right. And fair play to him, he came on and played brilliant in that final. He actually kicked what I thought was the winning point to put us a point up, but then Donegal equalised, And then 2016, then I brought a fella called Shea Tennyson from Mahray out. That was the year that we won it. Shea would have been playing in the forward line with Leighton Glynn and Shawnee Furlong. And it was actually Shea Tennyson who kept Tomas O'Connor out of the team that year because Shea was playing so well. He's maybe scoring 5 or 6 points per game. And then Shea came home from America at the end of August in 2016 and then joined back up with the Mahray panel. And then Mahray ended up winning the Armagh Senior Championship that year as well. So it was a good year for Shea in 2016.
Yeah, you're right.
And tell us this, see the way you went home early the last time after the final, did you get to stay for the celebrations after this year? No Bud Lights or nothing?
At 3 bottles of Coors Light after the match in Canton. And then again, we were actually at work the next day in Carrickmore. It was staff day, so I probably could have got it off. But the year before, it chanced my arm, and the principal had actually given me the 4 staff days off in 2015 to stay for the final. So I wasn't going to chance my arm again, for a day after the final just to go on the beer.
Yeah.
So I had a few beers in the plane on the way home, and then actually my friend Marty Murphy collected me in the airport in Dublin and drove me straight to Carrickmore. So I think we're meant to start. We're meant to start at 9 o'clock that day. And I think I was in about 10:10 with my suitcase and my pair of shorts on, flip flops, but I had the championship medal in my back pocket, so I wasn't too worried about what people thought.
Yeah. So then, Ronan, you went on to an senior job. You went over to Lurgan. You went over to manage St. Peter's then. Yeah,
that was 2017, 18, 19. I was with St. Peter's, and basically sort of going back on a previous point there, you'd asked me why I went back to America, and I sort of said that unfinished business from 2005. And in terms of 2017, Ciarán were still in the senior championship at that stage. So I'd left Ciarán at the end of 2016, and then I decided, right, I need to try and right the wrong of 2013 in terms of the intermediate championship. So that was my big focus at that stage, 2017. And I had never watched St. Peter's play a game hardly in my life at senior level. I didn't know any of their players. I knew Niall McConville was involved in the Armagh setup, and I knew Big Aaron Finton was involved in the Armagh setup, but I'd never spoken to one of the players. But I actually got a couple of friends go back to Paul Carville there. He's involved in a lot of schools coaching through Healthy Kids. That's his company. So I got in his ear and he says, look, can you put a word in for me with St. Peter's, saying I'll be interested in their job, in taking their senior team. So their chairman ended up phoning me up, and I went over and met them. And I took the St. Peter's senior team in 2017, because at that stage I knew that they were very close to winning the intermediate championship. I think in 2016 it maybe come third in the Division 2 league, and maybe quarter-final of the championship, so they weren't too far off, you know. So I went over there for 3 years then.
It was new territory for you and such, because you didn't know too much about them, just from what you'd read and sort of seen in the papers and stuff.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But I see, like, whenever you went in again, a great club, you know, and a really, really dedicated group of players. Like, probably the main benefit for me was their coach in 2016 was a fella called Christy Furphy, who's from Portadown. So I knew Christy, and Christy was sort of there in 2016. So whenever I got the job, I phoned Christy up to see if he'd be willing to stay on and help me coach them in 2017. And Christy agreed to do that. So I wasn't going in totally blind in 2017, because I would have relied very, very heavily on Christy in 2017 in terms of like team selections and players' personalities and stuff like that, you know.
And was there any rivalries between the Peters and Ciarán, you know, Lurgan, Portadown, or what's the sort of vibes between the two clubs?
There were a wee bit of slagging, like, you know, slagging from the own club members for taking them, and maybe slagging from St. Peter's supporters or players, with me being a Portadown man, you know. But it was all good natured, you know. And as I said, I had a very, very enjoyable 3 years with St. Peter's, definitely, you know.
But 2018 was your big year with the Peters. And
Yeah,
I suppose one of the main things that year was Niall McConville, who had played for Armagh. Ciarán McGeady didn't select him that year.
Yeah, that's right.
So you basically had Niall for the full year.
I'd
say it was a big help, you know. Obviously, county player, you know, didn't get picked. That's, you know, so he goes back and plays his best for his club.
Yeah.
And he's ended up winning the league and the championship that year.
Yeah, and do you see at that stage, Todd, at that stage, Niall was still very, very young. Like, Niall was only, whenever we won that championship, because I remember the interview afterwards, and the commentator couldn't believe it, Niall was only 26. Mm-hmm. Niall was only 26 in 2018 whenever St. Peter's did the double, you know. And as you say, having him available for the full year, and then sort of like Ciarán in 2013, there'd been a great buy-in from the players the year before. You know, the fitness levels were up, you know, and the players were committed, and they could see that they were close. You know, in 2017, we came third in the league and were beaten in the quarterfinal of the championship by Killeavy, who went on to win it. Mm-hmm. You know, so the Peters knew that they weren't that far away. And 2018 was what actually organised, but sat down at the end of 2017 and done a bit of an analysis. And I actually took Christy Furphy couldn't commit in 2018 for family reasons. So I actually brought in a couple of more St. Peter's people with me. I brought in Dermy Kearney, who had played for me in 2017 and retired. And then I brought in Christopher Toman as well, who would have been an ex-senior player and would be very, very knowledgeable of the players and knowledgeable of opposition, you know. And really, it was sort of very, very similar to 2013 with Ciarán, except eventually at the last hurdle, then they managed to get the job done and managed to win the championship, which again was which was the reason I went them in the first place, to win the championship, you know.
You beat Mullabon in the final. Yeah,
beat Mullabon in the final. We sort of had a hoodoo over Mullabon that year. We played them, I think, 5 times that year, and I think we drew with them once and beat them 4 times. And actually, in terms of winning the league, we went down to Mullabon on the second or third last league game, and it ended up a draw, and we were lucky getting out of that match with a draw. I remember Big Aaron Finton blocking a goal-bound shot from about 6 yards out from Eddie English, who would have been an Armagh player at that stage. So we sort of had the X over Mullabon that year, and Mullabon played Shane O'Neill's, I think, in the semi-final, and me and Christopher Toman went down the cross to watch it, and we were delighted, to be honest, that Mullabon won it, because we knew, like, they had three really good forwards. That Shea Loy, they had Eddie English, and Peter McDonald's son, Owen McDonald. And I knew, like, we had three good defenders who could mark those three players. You know, so, and the fact that we played them 3 or 4 times before and hadn't been beaten, I was pretty confident going into that final. But again, we only won it by a point. But the sort of scoreline suggests, or sort of hides, the true sort of runs of the match. We hit the crossbar 3 times in the first half, and Mullabon scored their goal about 3 minutes in injury time. You know, so really, in terms of a county final, it was pretty comfortable, you know, regardless of the scoreline.
Out of so that's, you won the league with Ciarán and Og. You were beating the final, obviously, because 2013 and 2018 were very, very similar. But out of winning the league with Ciarán and Og, your home club, winning the championship with Boston Wolf Tones, and then again winning the league and a championship double 2018, what sort of is up there as your best? Is it winning with a home club, or with all the sort of, with the defeats in America and coming back and getting it, or just doing the double in the league and the championship? What sits highest with you?
I would say probably, Brad, there, in terms of what you're saying, Nick, you sort of touched on it. You know, that 2013 year, you know, was very, very special. The fact that with 20 competitive games that year, and I think it was, can't remember exactly, I think it was maybe 16 wins, 3 draws, and a loss, you know. And the fact, like, what age was I then? I was 32 then. So the fact that you were doing it with friends, you're like, nearly everybody who played in that team had either played with them at underage or else had coached them at underage, you know. So there sort of was that real great bond between me and that group of players, that we basically were, and I was and still am, friends with practically every one of them. You know, so certainly that 2013 year would probably stand out, bar the unfortunate circumstances in the final, you know.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask that earlier, but obviously knew that you had some success later down the line. But you'd probably be like myself, where winning with a home club and your mates and the crack and all would be going on. That's one of them ones, I should say, you'd be sitting in the bar stool talking about it in years down the line.
Years to come,